your career path, being a former head teacher, being a tutor for UCL. I mean, you have achieved incredibly. Was there a moment where you ever felt like giving up or walking away?
I did walk away at one point because I got quite aggressive breast cancer.
Sorry to hear.
Just
Hello, welcome back to B3 Inspire. My name is Betsy Johnson, and today we are talking all about shining that light, the spotlight on everyday women, extraordinary impact. And I am really honored today to have with me a woman who has spent not just her career leading and making an impact, but also daring, a co-founder of Women's Ed, a global movement empowering women and leaders in education, an author, consultant, former head teacher, and a fierce advocate for women being 10% braver.
definitely.
Help me welcome the extraordinary Vivienne Porritte. Vivian, I am so excited to have you in this seat. And if there's anyone that deserves that spotlight, it's you.
That's so kind of you to say. And I'm excited for our conversation because I think we've got so much in common and so much also that we can develop together.
Amazing. So, Vivian, in your own words, who are you and what drives you?
Women Ed is something that I'm very passionate about extremely. And it started about 11 years ago when somebody like me, who'd been a head teacher, suddenly saw data saying that there was a massive gender pay gap. And I thought I was working pretty hard, every hour, every day. And then that infuriated me, and it infuriated some of the other people that I was talking to on what was then Twitter. And we did the most wonderful thing of just saying, well, why don't we just get together for tea? The most British thing you could possibly say. And we did. And while we were doing that, some of the men who were the very big Twitterers, as it were posting on Twitter, Women Ed looks as if it's going really well. And it was a catfight. So we didn't take that as funny at all. And that gave us the boost to say, well,
Amazing.
another reason why we need to do this.
That's right.
We didn't ever think it would last as long as it has so far, and we never thought it would go outside England. But it is now global. We've actually got people talking about India and states in the US now, for example. So
Brilliant.
it's very exciting. This drives all of us who are part of it to make a difference for other women, so that, and particularly for future women, for girls who are going to move into the sector, that you don't have to accept the status quo. And that's really important to all of us. So we want to change the status quo, both in women's heads, because we've all had centuries of sexism and male leaders. So we want to change the women's head to know that they can lead and how they could move towards doing that. And that drives all of us in Women Ed.
It's phenomenal. I mean, I sit here and I can tell you I have hugely benefits. Being 10% braver myself, taking that leap. I remember one of the conferences we attended, all of us have to write what we were going to do to be 10% braver. And I had never negotiated my salary. Being one of those women who culturally, you are very grateful with the fact that first you've got a job and you're being paid. Pay is not something you even talk about. So you are so thankful and never ever spoke about it. I came back from the conference and I felt, hang on a minute, am I missing something here? So one of my pledge I put on there was, I'm going to negotiate my next salary.
Did you?
Yes, Vivian, I did. I felt the fear, but I did it anyway. And it wasn't a big deal. It was like, yeah, done deal. I was like, what? So is this that easy? This is what I could have missed.
Absolutely.
It is really empowering. And I have been a benefactor of all the great work. So I'm grateful that the many of you dared to make that change. You're a former secondary school head teacher. If I'm looking at the current data using the DFE workforce census in 2024, it talks about the fact that we have only got 36% of female head teachers in secondary, although the workforce is majority females.
Well,
What was it like at the time when you were head teacher? Was this even worse data? And how did you navigate this to get to where you got to?
I didn't know about any of this when I was a head teacher, and that's why I got really angry later on when we all realised what the data was then saying, because you didn't see a lot of data coming out at that point. So I thought I was a good head teacher, a bad head teacher sometimes, a brilliant one other times, just like every other head teacher. And it never occurred to me as to why I had been able to make that move. I remember when I went to the first local authority conference, and I did then notice that there was an awful lot of them there, and there weren't that many other women. And in fact, most of the women were like me, had just been appointed. So I think I was on the cusp of people starting to say, hang on a minute, we can't do it like this. However, there was an awful lot of the men who were just there at the conference to meet their mates, not to actually participate. There was a whole row of them at the back just reading the newspaper. And I was still quite a young head teacher, so I was just astonished that they do that and that the people running the conference would let them. But of course they did at that time. So I knew we had something that needed to happen, and the women head teachers in that local authority started to work together, and I really enjoyed very much so. But it was still about another 6 years later before we decided that we would build Women Ed, because you can't do it on your own. You need a group of people, the CEOs as well.
That's right.
There are more women coming through as CEOs than they were when the system first started, but still not enough.
Not enough. More work to be done. So, Vivian, I would like you to share with us, what is something that people might be surprised to discover about the woman behind OBE, FRSA, FCCT, a great author and an amazing coach?
Thank you. I came from the Northeast in a disadvantaged family, and it would never have occurred to me in my life to get an OBE from Prince William at all. Never, never, never. Can I tell you just a quick story about that?
Please share that.
In the locality where I live, one of my MP was Dominic Raab, and I was always writing to him complaining about what was happening, and he always sent me letters that other people had written. You know, he wasn't responding. So one day I got a letter through the post, and it said on it, you know, all kinds of like DFE things. And my partner said, "Have you written to Dominic Raab again?" And I said, "No, I haven't. I've stopped. It's not worth it." And he said, "Well, you've got a letter from him here." So I opened it, and it was the invitation to go to the OB. And it had never occurred to me that anything like that would ever happen. And it isn't just for me, it's for everybody in the Women Ed community. But it was wonderful.
Incredible. I would like you to take you right back to the beginning. Was leading women in education always the mission, or did life redirect you here?
I always wanted to teach, always. It never occurred to me to go past that in that way. I used to play schools with my sister a lot. I was delighted to become a teacher, and I loved every minute of it, loved it. I was good with the kids. We got on very well. I had done drama as well, so we did plays as well as all of the academic work. And actually one of the girls who was the lead player in one of the plays we did, I went to her 60th birthday recently because we've kept in touch. And there's a whole group of them from my very first school that we keep in touch with. And I love that.
Insane.
And then I thought, well, I would like to move on a little bit. I would like to maybe be a head of department or something like that. And it took me quite a long while to do that because I was torn between leaving the kids and where else I would go. But I did move on to Sutton. It was a secondary modern.
Okay.
So everybody there, the girls felt that they weren't good enough, and the staff seemed to think, well, what do you expect then? Well, I just expected the best from everybody. And so I said, well, let's do a play. I'm going to put a play on. And the plays I always did with girls that age is we wrote it all. We did all of that ourselves. Well, we didn't write it down, but we developed it, improvised it. And in the end, they knew exactly what they were doing. And I'd said to them, well, what were you doing before I came? They said, oh, we were all the offstage chorus. And I couldn't accept that because there were some amazing kids there. So we did about 3 or 4 of them, and nobody ever believed us that we had created those. They just expected that we must have got them from somewhere, but we didn't. And in the very last year of that, when I was at that school, the National Theatre was running a competition for plays that had been presented in schools, and we got through to the final. There was absolutely nobody believed we'd do that play in this second school, but we did, and it got through to the final of the national competition, as I said.
Wow.
And we were 4th, and it was only the first 3 that got all the plaudits. But for my kids then in Sutton, where they'd had to change their accent, they'd had to change everything about what they did, they were astonished they even managed to do the play, never mind get into a final. And I loved that. They were amazing kids. I loved it.
I mean, the magic that happens when somebody starts to believe in them and give them that stage of absolutely you can do it. Right, Vivian, you were co-edited 10% Braver.
Mm-hmm.
What does being 10% braver actually means when you are the one that is writing?
So we wrote them for women, very definitely, in education, all 3 books really. And it seemed to us at the time that women were being too passive around their own career and feelings. So at our very first conference, we had 200 women there, and we started to explore the 10% Braver issue because it was Sue Cowley who was our first speaker, and her friend had told her, you're going to have to be 10% braver because you're nervous about this. And she shared that with us, and we all went, that's fabulous. We love that. That's going to be our mantra. Right, let's all talk about what that means. And it simply means you don't have to be courageous. You don't have to be pushing yourself forward. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. But if there is something you kind of have a feeling you could do, but you don't think anybody wants you to, then just do it. And when you're not dead after it, then do it again and do it again and do it.
Right.
And it took over so many women who said, I've done this and I never thought I could. And on Twitter at that time, we just would say, it's 10% Braver Week, tell us what you've been doing. And we got so many amazing stories from women. And it all just developed in a wonderful rush. And it was so exciting. And it still is now because we still get people telling us those stories.
How practical it is.
Mm.
And what you can actually put on there. Simplest things like, I'm going to speak about something to make a change in that meeting. Is that confidence boosted? It's like, yes, I can do this. Let's be 10% braver. You feel the fear, but you do it anyway.
Yes.
The impact that you are making in this field is just wonderful. And we want to see more of it, more women stepping up to see let's support each other.
And everybody helps each other in so many small or big, what you read in the books. But there's an awful lot of conversation going on behind all of that amongst community.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably one of the best things I've ever been able to be part of in my career.
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so what has been the hardest barrier that you have had to dismantle or to get through? And how did it actually look like? What did you do?
That's a fascinating question. I think in the early days, what was hard for us was there were a lot of men and women who were saying, this is ridiculous. What do you want this for? No point. There isn't any sexism in education. Gosh. And you're all being ridiculous and we're not listening to you. On Twitter at that time, everybody was just attacking each other all the time and it was horrible. So we just decided as a group that we weren't ever going to do that and we weren't ever going to reply to any of those ridiculous messages. We were just going to remove the air from them and ignore them completely. And the men couldn't cope with that. They wanted an argument, but we didn't want an argument because we were very happy with what we were doing. No, just ignore them and take their air away from them. And we continued to do that all of the time. And it certainly died down, all of that.
Silence your biggest weapon, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what upset us at the time were there were a lot of women that were joining in with that. So we just had to work around that.
You described what I see as silence as your greatest weapon. And of course, that worked.
That's a lovely way of putting it.
Looking at your career path, being a former head teacher, being a tutor for UCL, I mean, you have achieved incredibly. Was there a moment where you ever felt like giving up or walking away?
I did walk away at one point because I got quite aggressive breast cancer.
Sorry to hear.
Just more or less a year or so after Women Ed started, and the organisation I was working for at that point seemed to feel that meant I wasn't going to be productive. To me, leaders look after the people they work with, and they didn't look after me. And in the end, I said that, well, in the end, I got a solicitor and I said, they won't give me my year's performance pay for the year before I had cancer. And she said, why won't they? And they said, well, it's because you haven't done any work after it, even though I had. And I said, I think that's discrimination, isn't it? And she said, that's discrimination. So she put a brilliant form in to them. And what was really interesting is the person who received it was the new director who had just arrived that day. And she just paid it straight away because she wasn't going to argue with somebody she didn't know. And the evidence was right there in front of her. And I got a year's salary. And that made me decide that I was going to work for myself because I'm good at what I do, ever be treated in that way again. So I did a TEDx talk about it. So if you look for me on YouTube,
yes,
Vivienne Porritt, TEDx, and I tried to turn what had been very painful for me into something that might help other people.
Vivian, like to hear you talk about this is so inspiring. I would like you to take the opportunity to speak to, not the camera, not to me, that woman, that one woman listening to you right now. What message would you give to that woman?
Give up. Don't give up at all, especially if you're in education, because there are so many places you can work with your skills, and it's not worth working somewhere that is making you upset or ill or angry. And what I do in Women Ed is if people are in that situation in the school they're working in and they want to move somewhere else, but they've been so dragged down, they don't think they've got value to offer. One of the pledges I made in the early days at a Women Ed event was that if anybody was applying for a new job, talk to me first, reduce themselves in their application form by using very feminine adjectives, etc., etc. And I've done a video of that as well as to how to do that. I say you can't write that. You've got to boost yourself. You've got to say this, do this, change that language. And don't ever say, I would be pleased to get an interview. Because why shouldn't you get an interview? So we work on changing the language as well. And over the years, I've done that with so many women, and I'd love.
Not only have you provided that mentorship, and then you have done the coaching side of things and
Yes.
still offering to do more for women in that situation. Amazing work.
Well, and it's work I love. And it's important work for all of us, I think, because I think women make brilliant leaders and we need more of them in education.
Excellent. So in your work, you write about giving yourself the permission to be ambitious. Can you unpick that a little bit for our audience? What does that mean?
Related to what I was just saying about the application forms women write. It's as if they want to make themselves smaller than they are. And I don't want women to feel smaller in any way at all, because we're brilliant and we have to accept that we're doing good work and that we're successful. Your friends will tell you exactly, and you have to show the impact of that. You have to give the evidence of the impact, because when you compare what men write and what women write, it's really important that you don't hide your light under a bushel in that way.
Yes, and no one can do that for you, isn't it? So many women get a rejection of no. They don't get through the door. Why? Because of the language. We are not celebrating the impact that we are making. We do those things anyway. So we take them as given and don't really think that it's something huge that you are doing.
Totally agree.
And it's worth you talking about it.
I've done quite a lot of work on gender stereotypes, and women tend to talk about the social organisational things that they do, whereas the men tend to talk about the difference they've made. So I would just add that caveat in there for the women listening, because you don't move forward in leadership by being the person that helps everybody else. You've got to help the organisation and you've got to help the children, and that's the evidence you need to show.
Thank you so much for that nugget there. Vivian, I just thought with the current situation with artificial intelligence, I would just like to know your perspective.
I've dallied with it because I think you should always test it out. But I haven't used it beyond getting an answer to a question that I haven't understood or something like that. And this is a big if AI can in the future can ignore gender stereotypes in what it's saying, then it might be quite helpful. And I'm not happy about that.
I totally agree with you. Amazing. So, Vivian, are you ready? We are on to the lightning round. Okay. Right. One word to describe Vivienne Porritte. Kind. Your morning ritual, Vivian. What's kept you going and glowing in every sector? What is the secret?
I struggle to get out of bed sometimes. I like sleeping. If I'm able to help other people that day, that makes a difference to me. Looking back, if I can help people online or at an event or anything like that, or just a conversation, that makes me feel really good. I feel I've achieved something that day.
Brilliant. A book or a podcast that has changed how you see the world.
Demagogues, populism and misinformation. And I said, well, I want to write about misogyny and sexism. And my title would be, What Would the Suffragettes Think? And they let me write that. It was brilliant. I loved. There's more and more people who are focused on this now.
AI in one word, opportunity or threat, Vivian?
Opportunity. In brackets, as long as it's gender neutral.
I love that. Our last episode, we had Nadia Ferrari on, and she said opportunity with responsibility. If you've not watched that, the link is in the description below. Go and watch that video. What would be your AI prediction for education leadership in 10 years?
Some of the men I would not want to see leading it because they're out to make money. I want AI to be used for good. I don't want it to cause problems for people.
Training, upskilling, mindset shift, but also compliance wise.
Yes, definitely.
What is your last message to that B3 inspiring woman who is listening to you right now and thinking, wow, what an achievement, what a career, what an impact?
Join us on LinkedIn under Women Ed.
Yeah.
Let's because we were talking about what can we do together in that way, weren't we? So
That's
join
right,
us
yes.
on Women Ed in LinkedIn. That would be wonderful. And I have to say this, don't I? Just be 10% braver. Every single woman.
Just be 10% braver. And Vivian, before you leave, who would you nominate to take that seat in the series?
Nominate one of the other trustees in Women Ed, and that's Kezia
Amazing.
Featherstone.
We're looking forward to having Kezia in that seat. I am super excited. Vivian, you have not only been 10% braver your entire career, you have built, you have made an impact, you have dismantled those barriers, and you continue to leave a legacy that some of us will be able to walk in. Thank you so much for sharing all of this, changing our mindsets this morning on B3 Inspire and inspiring us to say no, and we are going to be 10% braver. Thank you for the great work you're doing in education and beyond.
And
we are privileged to have you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Betty. Loved working with you.
It's a pleasure. And if you're listening to me and you have not subscribed to B3 Inspire, I am going to remind you, hit that subscribe button and don't forget. Until next time, build your foundation, believe in your potential, and become unstoppable. Thank you for joining me, Vivian.
Thank you.